Day 2 of the June 98 7-day retreat in Springwater. I forgot to mention something during the opening talk, namely that at times during a break in the meeting block, I come into this hall and walk around, standing next to people who are sitting here. Very often, I don't even have my eyes open, just standing there enjoying the silence, the presence, without talking. I'm mentioning it because if you're not used to it, if you're here for the first time, you may think that you're being watched, evaluated, that I'm judging your posture, etc. That's not the case. It's just a marvelous thing to be together without the need to represent anything. The other thing I haven't mentioned yet is that talks often take as their basis, I don't know whether that's the right word, things that come up in meetings, personal and group meetings, questions that are brought up. They keep on working. And many different questions are like many little rivulets flowing into a stream, which is this talk. If there's ever anything that you're bringing up in a meeting that you definitely do not want to be brought up in a talk, then please let me know and I will remember that. Of course, I never mention names. Anyways. Also, let me say that I do not remember verbatim how the question was put, and as it happens, very often similar questions are asked by different people, which then sort of merge into a new question. When that is asked in a talk, and it doesn't sound like what you asked, please don't feel that you were not understood. And if you do feel like that, bring it up if it's an important thing. A number of people have brought up questions about this matter of sitting here, the difficulty of it. One person saying it's much easier to do Zen practice than to have no practice. Just being here, so difficult, so much easier to daydream. There isn't this control of the mind through a koan, through a practice. It's also been brought up how difficult it is to sit with all of this conditioning and yet feeling the attachment to it and not really wanting to look at it. It's been likened, this not wanting to look at it, has been likened to the fear of dying. Dying to all the stuff that we are identified with as me, which may or may not come up. If it doesn't come up, someone said, there's boredom. If it does come up, I don't want to look at it. And yet, amazingly enough, we all, or most of us, come back here. Or come here for the first time. But a lot of people come back to this seeming difficulty of just being with what is, and this restlessness wanting to be someplace else, or wanting for something else to be true about me or about this situation. Why does it have to be like this? Boring or painful, difficult, dreamy. Is it so? It's so simple and yet so difficult to let go of resistance and be with what's there. For the first time, it's always for the first time. Because whatever manifests right now has never been here before. And yet, this feeling of resistance, which is what? What is resistance? See, we can ask these questions of anything that comes up and shift from suffering the resistance to investigating it. It's a marvelous energy shift from enduring to inquiring. Which does not necessarily need to be a fancily formulated question, which sounds spiritual. It's just a different state of the body-mind from enduring to inquiring. Even the posture may change at a moment of coming out of this suffering into wondering. What is this fear of dying? Fear of being not what one is used to, not what one is identified with. All the stuff. What is it? And what is it does not mean our usual intellectual inquiry, which we're used to. We may be tired of or habituated to. It's not intellectual inquiry. It's just in the presence of a question, calming down, quieting down, to be better in touch with what's rumbling about. We all intuitively know this. If we want to really hear something, there's a strange sound walking through the woods, walking alone or together, and suddenly this strange sound, we say, hey, what was that? And we'll both stop in our tracks, stop talking, and listen. With an energy of trying to find out, trying to hear better, to discern accurately. So, feeling this mountain of resistance, which some people have reported, to doing this thing, whatever it is. What is the resistance? Not what is this thing that I ought to do, but what is closest at hand. is, I don't want this. Feel it out. What the body says and does in not wanting. Embracing, stiffening against something. Squishing. Crowding. Because, I'm saying this because when this is noticed, this resistance, and questioned amicably, not forcefully, not threateningly, friendly-like, all of a sudden everything has more space to unfold. That which is resisted and the resistance itself. And what is this? What is going on? Some space is created for wrinkles to unwrinkle in an amazing way. And one realizes one never has touched the stuff that goes on all the time. What is happening is living in commentary about the stuff, pro or con. For myself, against myself, for someone else, against someone else. Commentary, reaction, storyline, endless storylines. And what an amazing shift from storyline to actuality again, just what's here right now. I don't have to think about it or comment about it. I have to find out and touch it. The fear of dying, fear. And realizing I've never touched fear before. I always resisted it because I thought, story-wise, that fear is something dangerous to touch. Fear says, stay away. I'm awful. It's awful. It's dangerous. It's unbearable. All off the mark. All these remarks are off the mark. But very frightening or very energizing. And yet away from the simple being in touch with anger, fear, hatred, desire. Pleasurable experience. What is it really like? Usually a pleasurable feeling arises and switching into the story about it and keeping it going by living the story with all of its branchings. What really is pleasure, pleasurable energy? How is it evoked? How is it maintained? I don't mean analytically, but as we go experientially to learn in looking and listening and touching and experiencing, non-judgmentally. Is this what this work is, some people ask, just endlessly watching and witnessing and observing this conditioned reactive body-mind with all its memories, all its projections? Is that all there is to this work? Does it ever end? One person said this morning, it's not just like being conditioned, it is like being pickled. It's a good analogy. All the way through there's not a particle of a pickle that isn't pickled. awaring pickledness, stuckness, boredom, resistance. Is awareness also pickled, caught up? When it is not awareness. Awareness is free, illuminating the conditioned body-mind, the stuckness, the resistance, the fear, the anger, illuminating it, not expressing it, but illuminating it, learning as it is watched, as it is aware, the fear, the anger, the desire. And noticing, maybe to one's surprise, maybe not, that we don't want to watch. We want to be with all of these conditioned movements. That's where our habit and our feeling of security and existence lies. Moving with the stuff. Resisting, stopping and looking and listening in a fresh way. There are ideas about that. One person saying, feels like dying to the stuff. The stuff is me, and me is existence. And there's a fear of being nothing, not existing. All of these ideas, which are story, unfounded, unproven, but very effective in inciting this organism to react violently with horror, fear, timidity. Does it help when somebody says there's nothing to be afraid of in simple listening and looking here now without needing to be anything, anybody? Does it help to hear that? There's nothing to be afraid of in seeing that our whole conditioned existence is just that. Conditioned, temporary, fictitious. We're living in fiction most of the time about ourselves and each other, and holding on to that as though it was the real thing. Fictitious ideas about ourselves and the others and the world we live in. 10 billion fictions. I don't know how many human beings there are, because they're often shared fictions. We reinforce each other in our fictions about ourselves and the world. And a resistance to stepping out of the fiction, to waking up, because I may lose everything that I think I hold dear. Very powerful thought, getting the body going in this sort of holding on mode. One person told this to me very early, first meeting, first day. I couldn't sleep all night, and it was all right. It was not my usual fretting over not being able to sleep. And yet I could feel a holding on. And questioning a bit, holding on to what? No, it was just holding on. Not to this or that, just a holding pattern. And observing that, awareing that, as well as the birds, which if one doesn't sleep at night, early in the morning, there is a racket of birds. They're most active early in the morning. It may not or may not relieve the holding pattern, hearing this twittering of hundreds of birds, so it sounds. But it's the same awareness, whether it's of holding or twittering. Same awareness. Car trafficking down the road. Same awareness in listening, attending. Whether it's this or that or that or this, it doesn't matter. It's the same awareness. Today and tomorrow, timelessly, same awareness, same presence, which has no past and it has no future. Sometimes people ask me, what's going to be the future of the center? I always shudder a little bit when this question comes. I can't deal with it. Future of the center is this now, this present moment. Are we here? Are we really here? Without any kind of a holding pattern. Holding on to me and my plans, my ideas, my preferences, my desires and fears. If there's pure, simple, unadorned, undivided presence, that's the future of the center, if you want to put it that way. Otherwise, it's just repetition, more of the same. Conditioning, wanting, fearing, dominating, submitting. So, the essence of this work, twofold, I sometimes say, or don't take the two too seriously. Just for a moment, we'll say twofold. Bearing all of this conditioning, exposing it or letting it expose itself from moment to moment. What I think I don't want to see because I'm attached to ideas about myself. But that's just another conditioning, pictures about myself. Here is the picture and here is this greedy thought or angry or hateful thought or pleasurable thought or loving thought. Here it is for a moment, regardless of how the picture says I am. This is what I mean by letting it expose itself, how we really are. But you cannot grab it. And that's what we usually do. We say, oh, you are this way or I'm that way. This is what I really am. Very territorial or very giving or very this or that. This is, again, let's shudder a little bit when we hear this because that leaves 90% out. And now throws the light on 10%. Which are also temporary, although some of our habits are seem to be pretty permanent. Seem to be. So let us expose ourselves to ourselves and each other without jumping in with conclusions. This is how I am, this is how you are. We leave that to psychiatrists or therapists. They feel they need to work with these categories. There may be some advantage to that, roughly. But here let's be surprised or interested in what unfolds and reveals and exposes itself, and not fixated in any term, in any word, in any category, which it's the other dangerous thing of saying I am this way or you are that way. You're dominating or you're controlling or you're territorial or this or that or I am. These words they're not neutral words. They have hooks to them, hooking into the emotions of the one to whom they're addressed. Already implied as in there is something bad, something undesirable, something to be exterminated. And then we have cut ourselves off from a creative dialogue about ourselves and each other, because we've placed each other into categories with a label which has emoting or emotion-arousing connotations. When I was years ago in school, sociology or social psychology, we had to analyze newspapers and articles and find out whether there were any non-emotion arousing words in the article, to find those. Very interesting study. And we are like journalists talking about each other. And I'm not saying every journalist is like that. There's some attempts made by some people to watch their language. So the language is neutral and factual and does not exploit words which have hooks on them. It's a marvelous exercise for all of us to engage in as we talk to each other about each other, as we talk to ourselves and about ourselves to ourselves. What are the words we're using? Are they factual? And it is an ongoing inquiry. It never terminates because we're so conditioned to use loaded language. It's been used on us and we're using it on others. Little aware of the damage that is being done. Or maybe we want that effect temporarily. Later on we're sorry. So where was I coming from with all of this? Lots to observe, lots to question in this exposing, displaying. Let everything come on display. There is this inner transparency. Maybe not immediately, maybe not always, but amazingly here one sees transparently what one is thinking and the effects. How one is about to be sucked into a story about one's suffering, one's victimization, or how one has been sucked in. Very often the transparency comes later. First comes the being sucked into something. That's not impossible. Particularly not in a retreat with a kind of retreat energy, let's call it that way. Makes possible more of this inner transparency. One person told me that once. She had lived in New York City and she moved to Ojai, California because she had heard one talk by Krishnamurti in New York City. And he had talked a good deal of the time about jealousy. She said afterwards, after the talk, she saw Krishnamurti standing with some women talking in an engaged way. And she said, I could see jealousy in myself. I could really see it. And Isn't it amazing? Normally we think if we see something like this, we don't want to see it, we deny it, we whitewash it. It made her move from New York City to Ojai to hear more from that man who was pointing out things about ourselves, which when they're really seen, and I mean really seen, not just thought about, not just partial attention sort of out of the side of one's eye and not quite there with it, but really illumination or insight, then with that comes an incredible joyous energy. Even if I see how jealous I just felt about him talking to someone else. He seems to like her better than me, this kind of feeling. Why not me? Oh, well, we all know it. I don't have to. So this is the one aspect of sitting, this displaying, this illumination, unfolding of our pickledness, our conditioning. And the other aspect, even inseparable from this, is the emptiness of viewing it all. And by emptiness I mean no mysterious experiential state, but no one there to judge or feel targeted. No targets, just what's there, empty-like. And in this case, in this second aspect, the emptiness permeating everything. And what it illumines or what it shows up is of secondary importance. That there is a hurt, or there is an anger, or there is a fear. That's of secondary importance. Essential is the presence, the empty space in which it all happens. Empty space without time. No yesterday in that, and no tomorrow, and no you and me. Because it's all permeated by one emptiness of space, spaciousness, vastness. In which what is happening can reveal itself momentarily, factually, unadorned by loaded language. And with this I come to one more comment that was made and is often made in retreats here, where we, particularly in the summer months, we listen so much to the birds and the tweet, 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 and da-da-dee, whatever it all is. Caw, caw, caw. That's more in the wintertime. Right now it's the babies crying. Listening to all of that and the traffic. People asking, that can't be all. That can't be the whole thing. It doesn't seem that this is all. And this may not be an intellectual judgment. It comes out of how one is listening, sort of partially or separate from what one is hearing. Me, the hearer, and that which I hear. And that is, of course, not satisfactory. It isn't the whole thing. And out of that way of listening comes the question, is that all? Tweet, tweet, tweet? Isn't there must be something more? Yes, there is. The whole thing. The whole thing. Undivided. Full of stuff, and yet totally empty. here. We will end here for today.